G'day, g'day. Wherever you may be in the universe, welcome to Mastering Music, Mastering Life. I'm Tony Jack the Bear Mans, coming from Deluxe Mastering, Melbourne, Australia. I think it's still the world's most livable city. At least I believe so. Not in our recent times of lockdown. But anyway, here we are back in the studio after taking a little hiatus in the podcast. And I'm so delighted today to have as my guest one of the greatest live sound guys on the planet. His name is Sean Sullivan. He's in Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles, I call it Los Angeles. I don't mean to take the piss, but welcome to the podcast, Sean. Thank you so much for taking time out to have a chat today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the call.
Yeah, well, the reason we're having this talk is I didn't know who the heck you were, to be perfectly honest, because as a studio guy, I'm not very au fait with the live engineering scene, particularly at the upper echelon. The only other guy I know, because I've met him, was guy called Pab, who works with Paul McCartney predominantly amongst, AC/DC and whole, but he's up in that upper echelon where you reside. And
I know him well.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. So I got to meet Pab, and he was doing a thing at SAE here and talking about life on the road and what it's like being a live sound guy. And I don't really get a lot of front of house guys on my podcast, not for any particular reason other than I just don't know that many. So this girl called younger who I mentor myself, her name's Alison, and she's a freak. She's got obscenely amazing ears. She's incredibly technical. She really knows her stuff. And one day she said to me, "Hey, you should talk to this guy." So I looked you up online. I hit you up, and took a little while, but here we are. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you today, my friend. And we can blame
Thanks, Alison.
And we can blame her.
Yeah,
for the whole fiasco.
Yeah, thank you for exactly. That's great.
So my I had a misunderstanding along the way, because for some reason, I don't know why, I thought that you were an Australian guy. And you were, an expat living over there, and then you corrected me this morning. So, not that makes any difference, but you can be an honorary Australian just for this podcast.
It's one of my favorite places to visit, so I don't mind being honorary. That's great.
So, who were you touring with when you came out here last time?
The last time was Shania Twain last year, I think it was.
Yeah,
or maybe it was 2018. I can't remember. It might have been 2018.
And you
last time.
And you enjoyed being here, yeah?
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite places to visit. It's just amazing people. The weather is always nice. It can be quite hot if you get to the West Coast a little bit, as you know.
Yeah.
But I always have a good time there. And where you are, Melbourne's one of my favorite cities. Amazing food, amazing art. Everything about it's just a great place to visit.
Yeah, it is a good city, apart from this lockdown. How's lockdown and the whole COVID thing affected you and your industry? Obviously, it's decimated us over here, but how pervasive has it been, and what's the current situation with you and COVID and your work situation?
On a personal level, since I live in Los Angeles, it's pretty tough here. They've been really hardcore and strict about it. We've had pretty high numbers, I guess you could say, from the beginning. Los Angeles is pretty packed. It's one of the biggest cities in this country. So having a lot of people on top of each other, like the East Coast and New York and stuff, makes it a lot easier for things to get out of hand. So they've been pretty strict about it here. Most people have been pretty okay with it. I'm not the most okay with it, just because it's affected me financially so hard. The touring industry is basically shuttered completely. There's people just trying to pick up the pieces with live streaming and that kind of stuff. That stuff's just getting started. And I just did my first one about a week and a half ago with a band called Lucius. A couple friends of mine that have been mixing on and off for a little bit. It's tough, it's just everybody's scared and everybody's locked down. And, some businesses it's weird for me because, you can go to the grocery store and people go there all day long and have no problem and are not scared of any virus. But if you get together in big groups, God forbid, so it's kind of bizarre. It's a tough one. The whole industry's shut. So not much we can do about it currently.
So how are you adapting yourself to to sort of keep yourself busy or try and, you know, create opportunities for yourself? Is it studio work?
As you can see behind me, I own all my touring equipment, and I have quite a large rig, and I do I was supposed to be on tour with Rage Against the Machine this year.
Oh, wow.
And we were basically a couple weeks into rehearsals when we officially got locked down, and everybody said, all right, time to stop. And so I went home with my gear and just over 2 weeks of rehearsals from them rehearsing. And I've been sitting here basically trying to get my show together for when we do start back up, which is, we're scheduled to start back up in June, I think, of next year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how accurate that will be, if we actually we'll do that. But so since I have my gear, I've been doing that. I do some educational training as well. I advertise on my Sound by Sully page. People can call me and do like we're doing now, do a Zoom meeting. I have my whole rig is connected to Zoom, and I can, you know, demo situations or things or lay out consoles. I can pull up my console screen, and, you know, my rig is pretty well dialed to the education side, mostly because I had to when it came to, you know, COVID and nothing going on. I was like, now what? So I figured I might as well take this training thing a little more serious. And I don't do it all day, every day. It's not like something I earn enough money that I can forget about touring, but it's keeping me busy on top of the other things I do with, you know, I'm a nut about this sound stuff. And so I've worked on shows. Not only have I been working on my Rage show, but I have recordings from every band I've worked for. And sometimes I just get bored and I'm like, hey, let me recall that session and mess with it, or start over from scratch and, you know, get better at it, figure out how to make things better. Cause this is a time when it's easy to do, you know, when you're at an arena setting up and the chairs are being thrown out on the floor, and, you know, the ushers are showing up, making sure the chairs are clean. You know, there's not a lot of like getting really nitpicky at that time of the day. You know, you have just enough time to get the rig working and get the show going. And so having this kind of time at home and the gear set up it's as bad as it is financially, it's really good educationally, because I'm trying to learn how to be better at this every day of the week. You know, I've been doing it a long time, but I don't ever want to stop getting better at it. That's for sure.
No, I think that's true. I think with anything, there's always a very steep curve in the beginning when we're learning stuff to get to that level of being, you know, unconsciously competent, where, you know, you look at someone doing their thing and you look at them and you think, well, I could do that just by simply looking at them. Right. But then after that, you know, people sometimes think that they plateau, but I agree with you. I think there's always new stuff to learn. There's always something else to, not that you're necessarily looking to throw the baby out with the bathwater or reinvent yourself completely, but again, it's those small incremental things, and over the period of time, when you stop and look over your shoulder, it's only then that you realize, oh wow, you know, I've actually learned a lot, or I've gained a lot of knowledge or a new skill set or what have you. So why don't you take us back? Just give us a quick overview of how you got started in this mess, and then because I like you, I'm lucidly an educator, and, you know, and I mentor people, and it's a passion of mine. I'd like to drill down a bit onto that and what got you there, and what are the kind of things that you offer and do, and et cetera. So why don't you just run us through a bit about how you got into this whole situation?
I luckily started young with brothers. I'm a third of four boys in my family, so I had two older and one younger. And my father was a young dad who was into rock and roll music and had a great record collection. And he was not afraid to listen to rock and roll at our house, you know. And growing up, that was kind of like the atmosphere in our house, was my pops listening to Led Zeppelin and, you know, Black Sabbath and those kind of bands. And you know, I just turned 50. I was born in 70. Okay. You know, and so at 75 through 85, you know, I was 5 to 15 years old. I had a dad who was a rock and roller and had a good time listening to music. And my older brothers and I, we kind of got into music young. And my father was a fireman who loved what he did, but didn't really like adore his job like I do my job as a sound engineer. You know, he got paid well, and he got pension and benefits and sick paid days, and, you know, all the greatest things that like a city job would give you. But at the same time, he's risking his life every day to go to work, you know,
Sure.
and also he was a paramedic / fireman. So he was scooping up dead people, and, you know, it was a tough, hard job.
Yeah.
And we all thought we were going to be firemen. We come from a long line of Irish firemen, and we all thought we were going to do that for a living. And the music was what we were passionate about and what we had the most fun doing, and being in bands. I played a little bit of everything. I'm not very good at anything, but I play some guitar, I play some drums. And that was just what we had fun doing. And my dad was cool enough to go, well, do what you like. Like, you don't have to be a fireman. Do something that's fun, and then you don't go to work. You know, if you get paid to have fun because you love it, you know, here you are as kids doing it for nothing, and you're not earning a penny, and you do it all day nonstop. Like, if you can find out how to get paid doing that, then do that. And so I did. I took that really serious. That advice hit me really hard. Like, I didn't want to pick up dead people for a living, you know, and risk my life putting them out burning buildings, you know. It was that didn't as reverent of a job that kind of seems on paper, like seeing your dad come home from a 24-hour shift where he got his ass kicked all night and risked his life all night, and see him just being a wreck the next day because of it, where he was just like exhausted. And, you know, it's tough, hard, backbreaking work to, like, when you put a fire out there, tearing the house apart to look for fires, and it's tough, hard work. And not that I'm afraid of tough, hard work. Just to me, it was like,
not fulfilling.
It didn't seem like it didn't seem the avenue I wanted to go down. It was like, I want to have fun and get paid for it. And so that's what I did. I took it serious really young.
I guess you could be grateful for having a dad who was supportive. And unfortunately, what I find is a lot of kids have parents who, I guess, they're well-meaning, and they don't understand that anyone that wants to go down a creative, artistic path in life, it's always been deemed as a hobby or a nice thing to do on the side. But, you know, get yourself a quote-unquote real job, which will allow you to finance your hobby or what have you. And I was the opposite of you in the sense that my dad was meant to be a surgeon. Life got in the way. He didn't go become a surgeon. I was groomed to become a lawyer, and I didn't take up the opportunity to do that. He didn't speak to me for 7 odd years. But again, sometimes I've asked myself, and I've gone, and it has been asked to me, I wonder what would happen if my dad was actually supportive and said, "Yes, son, go to studio, sweep floors, you're 15, get an internship." And I guess the answer is I'll never know. What I do know, though, is that because of his resistance, it created the fuck you in me. You know, I'm going to do this, and resilience to just keep punching through. So I'm at a point where I'm grateful to Dad for that. Now, it took me a long time to get there, but so it's great that your dad was your dad was into it, and he supported you. And did you go? So did you get straight into live sound?
I started because I was with, you know, my brother's bands playing, and I was in bands. I kind of always got stuck as a younger kid hanging out with my older brothers in bands. I kind of always got stuck doing backline and setting up the practice PA, and, you know, which we just plugged microphones for vocals in. It was, you know, basic. We were kids. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. But I got usually the task of dealing with that stuff because my older brothers were just, you know, bullies and pushed me around and made me deal with that shit. And I enjoyed it. I didn't care. Like, sure, push me around. It was fun. I got to hang out with the band. I was sneaking into bars I shouldn't have been into because I was with the band, you know, and I was too young. And that part of it was just intriguing. And, you know, so sure, if I had to lift a speaker cabinet or plug a guitar amp in, like, I didn't give a shit. Like, cool. All right, I'll do it. And so I initially was like, my very first part of it was, yes, live sound because of being around the bands. But the first time I took it serious and got paid for it, I started doing car stereo early in high school. I was working for this place that did really extreme high-end car audio installs for like competition vehicles. Like, I don't know if you know, but there's really hardcore in America. There's massive like leagues of, you know, it's called IASCA, you know, the International Auto Sound Challenge Association or something like that. I'm probably screwing that up, but
so this
they took it really serious, and Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, so I've seen some of the rigs where you've got 64 subwoofers and 400 speakers, and they're all trying to go like 200 decibels and all this kind of ridiculous kind of.
Yeah, see, but back when I was doing it though in high school, it was a little less about SPL and it was more about sound quality. Like the SPL kind of came later, the lots of subs. And of course we put subs in cars and we had full range systems, but it was more about the sonics of it and the tuning of the rig and being all about, the sound quality. And I worked for this company called PJ's Auto Sound. And this guy was a world-class competitor who had won lots of competitions. And he was also a master installer. And he was the one that really taught me how to listen and figure out find something you don't like and figure out how to deal with it. Because we were putting third octave EQs and three-way crossovers back in cars in the early 80s, we were doing that shit, modifying rain EQs and rain crossovers to work with 12 volts. And actually, we would build power supplies that would produce plus and minus 15 volts. We would power them that way. We would just hot rod into the circuit boards. And, we were doing some pretty cool stuff. I was a keen kid because my dad was a fireman and my dad had a very regimented military, fire departments, police departments that run like the military. And so we weren't bossed around like that, but we had a very my dad, there wasn't a thing my dad didn't know. My dad could tie 150 knots and he did everything around our house. And so I just grew up being like that and being around somebody that was like that. I was very inquisitive and always wanted to know, when my parents bought me something for Christmas, I'd take it apart and try to put it back together before I would play with it, Right. That's just the kind of kid I was. And so when I got into this car stereo stuff, that was just the next stepping ground for it, to work on stuff and figure out how things work and the sound aspect of it. Because I was in bands and I liked being around bands, this guy that ran the place, he recognized in me the desire to be good at it and saw that I was better than any other punk kid that he hired, for minimum wage, and really kind of absorbed me into his world and taught me about listening and tuning. And, I was 14 in junior high school, and 15. I was working before I even we were supposed to not even be working until we're 16, but I was already working as a kid. And then the band stuff kept going. I kept working for my brother's bands and my own bands. And about, I'd say my junior year in high school, my brother asked me, he showed me this, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio in the Midwest, and we had this, music magazine, like a local rag paper called Scene Magazine. And it was, where bands were playing over the weekends, what bars had what going on. And back they had a little classified section. And it was this oldies band called Class of 57 that did 50s and 60s doo-wop. They were pretty popular in the Cleveland, Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan area. They were pretty big. All they did was they were a cover band that did doo-wop. And they had an ad in this magazine said truck driver / sound engineer wanted. And my older brother, who was a drummer, who still is a drummer to this day, he forced me to call him. He's like, you better call those guys. You know what you're doing. Go get that job. And I was like, I'm not a truck driver. He was like, so? He's like, what are they going to have? A van or something? Who cares? Call them. And I called them. They asked me to come out that weekend and do a show with them. And because I had kind of already had a base for this stuff and already knew the basics of it, of the three of us that showed up for the gig, I was the one that knew the most. And I was the one that handled shit the best. And so the guy who was the front of house truck driver, monitor engineer, lighting guy, backline guy, did everything. He was on the way home from the gig that night, he was like, hey, which one of you guys can come tomorrow? Because I'm the bass player in this band tomorrow. And I need one of you guys to be me tomorrow. And the two other guys had excuses. One was taking his girl out to dinner. The other one was a singer in a band. And I was like, I'll come. And they hired me on the spot the next day. And I was 16. I was making $100 a night working for this oldies band in 1986. And they were doing 4 and 5 nights a week. So I was making cash, $500-600 a week. I was making more money than my old man as a lieutenant of the fire department. And he was like, shit, if you can do this at this little crappy level in Ohio, he's like, then it's got to be more out there than what this is. So by all means, pursue this stuff. And I did. I just took it serious. I read books. I educated myself instead of going to, there really were no good classes or schools you could take like there are now. Now there's Full Sail and there's a lot of educational SAE, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. there's a lot of stuff that you could dig into nowadays, and the internet, YouTube, but none of that shit existed. So I just dug down and found books and took it serious and got good at it on my own by just doing it every night, doing it a lot of nights of the week. And the guitar player in that band reconed speakers for a living, and he was a sound guy as well, and he saw the shine in me, and he was like, you know what you're doing, but you're just smart enough to be a troublemaker. So, and he gave me a couple books that I didn't know about that were sound books, and he was like, here, read these. And I never read them cover to cover, but when I would do a gig and something would go wrong or not go my way, I'd come home and I'd find a chapter about it, I'd read about it, and I just took this shit more serious than anybody else thought they would ever took something serious that at that young of an age, and got good at it and kept moving on from there.
Yeah. Did you who would you consider to be your main mentor growing up? As you sort of got into the ranks, and was there anyone in your life that you considered to be, the main dude, or
like an audio mentor? You used to like a mixer, like a mixing mentor. You're talking about?
Yeah.
Where I grew up in Cleveland, there was a sound company called Aggressive Sound, run by a guy named Jeff Hare, who mixes Man of War and Warrant. He was in the Guinness Book of World Record back in the day for with Man of War for the loudest concert ever.
Oh wow!
In the early '90s or late '80s, I think. Yeah. And this guy owned all the PAs around Akron. We had the Akron Agora. We had Filthy McNasties. We had a bunch of rock bars. Cleveland was a good rock and roll town to grow up in.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of cool bars, and this guy had all the PAs and all the consoles and all the gear and all of them. And either him or his guys were at every one of them when I would show up with my brother's bands. My brother's bands played all these bars, or other bands that I worked for played all these bars. And when I would show up knowing a little about what I was doing, but not the most of what I should know what I was doing, all his guys or him were really cool to me. They were all like, all right, kid, yeah, you're the sound guy, but you're screwing this up. Do this, do that. They were really cool and showed me, I knew what a high pass filter is, but I didn't know how to use it. You know what I mean? As a kid.
Yeah.
I knew what compressors were, but I didn't know how to use them. I knew what EQs were for, but using them to my benefit was something I was still grasping as a young kid. And these guys were really cool about it. Instead of going, get the hell out of the way, this is my job. They were like, and Jeff Hare especially, who I'm still buddies with today, good guy, great guy, great mixer, really cool guy. These guys were, I would say they were probably like my main audio mentors, because they were the ones that were between me and these consoles, not any other reason other than they were the ones standing there, and they were cool instead of jerks about it. Because how it is, you could run into people that know what they're doing and they realize you don't, and the last thing they want is you in their way.
Yeah.
But these guys were cool and didn't push me away, and helped me out as much as they could, and helped me get better faster before I got to that oldies band level of mixing. And then when I got to that level, I knew more about it than anybody they had ever met as well. And so the oldies band was like, wow, this kid knows what the hell he's doing. Even I remember the boss even asked me one day, he's like, how the hell do you know how to do this? You're 16. How are you this good at it already? And I was like, to me, it was kind of like, why is he asking me this? How am I that good at it? I didn't even realize I was that good at it. I just knew I took it serious enough to be better than the next guy,
Yeah. I think there's something to be said also in one of the things that never ceases to amaze me is that as much as you like to think, or your ego likes to think that you're an experienced cat, you've been around the block, you know a couple of things, and then you come across these kids and they blow you away with what they know. And sometimes I find I get more out of mentoring the kids than they probably get out of me, and learning stuff around, particularly in a digital sense, because I guess like you, I'm an old school analog guy. You obviously now embrace the digital world fully as your industry has moved more into that.
For sure.
Certainly in my world, I'm an analog guy, and I have my way of working, and I have embraced digital. But kids today have really, really taken it on, and so now these kids are showing me different techniques and different things and different plugs and as a way to enhance what I do. And it's the same thing. I go, fuck, where'd you come up with this, man? Who taught you this?
Right.
But they did.
How do you know that?
Yeah. And so there's this really, great two-way street that goes on towards learning. And as you alluded to earlier on, there's always something new to learn. There's always something way to get better, even if it's just a small incremental thing. But we're gonna die and we won't have all the answers and won't have reached there's never going to be an end destination point to. That's all that. So tell us a bit about your rig back there, man, because it looks impressive. Now I'm an ignoramus when it comes to the live sound gear and what's hot and what's not. So just take us through what it is and what it does and a bit about your workflow in terms of in a live situation how it all comes together.
So I'm kind of a hybrid rig where I still do a bunch of analog stuff with the digital stuff. The console's an Avid S6L 32D, which is a 192 input by 96 output digital console, 96K digital console. It connects to Pro Tools 96K, 190 channels with one Cat5 cable. Like, it's very, it's a nice little walled garden. It's kind of like using Apple phones and Apple computers and Apple watches. They all just talk perfectly, and having this stuff all be Avid based is very simple and works well. And the desk is two-way bi-directional communication with the Pro Tools. So if you make snapshots or if you move a playhead in Pro Tools, the desk and they both kind of keep up with each other. So it's a HD Pro Tools rig with two Mac Pros in that rack there.
Mm-hmm.
My backup rig is a Waves LV1 console, which is a full digital rig. So if this main desk ever shits the bed, I have in this other rack here underneath me, I have the drive rack that I get to the PA with. I have AES outputs from the main console and AES outputs from that console. And I have a full dialed mix in that thing as well. And so it's just a backup rig, instead of because this live sound, we're not like, if your Pro Tools rig crashes, you tell everybody go get a coffee and you'll get it back working. Well, live,
exactly.
We don't have that option. We got to have it working at all times. The band leaving the stage because of technical problems is not ever going to happen on my watch.
It's not an option. Exactly.
No, not at all. So I have basically two rigs out here. That console is fed with MADI outputs from this console's stage racks. So the Avid stage racks live on stage. They feed this desk through its own snaking system, but then it has MADI outputs that come to this console. So it's not, I guess you could say it's not 100% redundant, but of the things that break on this console when they do break, which isn't very often, knock on wood, I've never had an issue with it. And I've been using the Avid products for years now, since like 04. This desk has only been out since 2014, but no problems with them. But the desk is usually, the engine and the desk are usually the ones that screw up on you. The stage racks, like if this shit crashes, the stage racks stay in the current state that they're in, and the preamps, everything stays set. So the MADI outputs will continue to push MADI no matter what. So that's, main and backup. And here, I'll take this off of here and show you real quick.
Yeah.
Pull this around here. I have this rack right here, which is like my hybrid stuff. So I have an H3000, an Eventide Eclipse. This is my first EQ I ever grew up with, the MEQ Alesis. So it's in here for a joke, like with my big smiley curve.
With the smiley curve. I love it. Yeah.
It's not even plugged in, but it's just in there for a placeholder.
Yeah.
And then I have a Fatso for parallel drum stuff. I have a 33609 Neve for parallel drum stuff. I have a Neve Summing Amp, so I send all my mix buses to the Neve Summing Amp, and then I return the mix bus of this back to the Avid console. And I have shortcuts in there that I can, bypass all this analog gear and go straight to the digital stuff I want to. I love meters. I'm a sucker for Duro meters, so I have some Duro meters in this rack.
Yeah, they're sexy.
This is the PA drive stuff. These are called Lake LM44s. This is how we get AES and distribute it to all the, because the amplifiers for our typical arena rig is about 100 amplifiers, So we send Dante, which is digital, network audio out of here to the rig. Below it is this is MADI to analog, so I can get to all this analog gear, and this is RME is MADI to AES, so I can get to anything that I want to do AES wise. Sorry with my camera angles.
No, that's cool, man.
I have some more durometers up top here that I'm using for group metering or matrix metering, whatever I can do. I can set these up with snapshots to be whatever I want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then on this side is the record rig and the backup stuff. Oh, sorry, I lost you.
No, that's all right. It's got a different camera. Got a different camera now. I'm in a dark room, and we'll get you back. It's the beautiful thing about doing these things live and on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. Why is it doing what it's doing?
That's all right.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, back again.
So that's the wave servers and stuff for the backup console. Some drawers, my interface stuff to get in and out of Smart and my laptop so I can play back walk-in music and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. There's my Smart rig over here with the screen for all the system analysis so we can tune PAs. That's the LV1 console and Pro Tools. And then this screen, which is my video stuff, would be normally like the PA drive stuff when we were doing a show and hooked up for a concert.
Mm-hmm.
That's mad. Really, it's a lot of stuff, but it gets the job done, and I can, get my point across fairly easily.
Yeah. What's the hardest thing about touring? What's been, in your opinion, in your experience?
Leaving your family at home and your dogs and saying goodbye for 3 months and then being in Australia and being a day and a half ahead of, where everybody else is, and time zones, it's day where you're at and it's night where they are. And I don't think going on tour and being on the road is that hard in the sense of when you're there and you're doing that stuff. It's more the mental preparedness that you need to like live two lives. When you come home from touring, you're not this front of house guy, you're just your dad to the kids, or your spouse to your wife or whatever, it's like, and guess what? Nobody's picking you up to take you to the gig. Like now you got to go like do your own things. You got to buy your own toilet paper and become a human being again. Cause when you're on the road, we kind of really get taken care of, don't we? You know what I mean? Like everything is handed to us. Every meal is made for us. Even on days off, where we lay around in our hotel rooms tired and we just order some food and it shows up. And,
mm-hmm.
It's just two completely different lives that you live, which is probably the most difficult part about it, I would say.
One thing that I guess it shouldn't amaze me, but I guess understanding things from the other side, people don't fully appreciate what's involved in a live show. Punters come up and they watch a gig, and if people only could fully appreciate the personnel involved, because everyone's hidden and out of view. We see a band and they do their thing, and I guess that's what people are paying for, and that's what they're expecting. But if people actually would see, if you could break it down and say, look, here's the lineup of every single person from, riggers, lighting guys, sound guy, front of house, fallback, tour manager, riggers, the people that just the roadies wheeling, doing the bump in and the load out, and it's extraordinary when you think about how many people are involved in putting it, and it's a very underappreciated part, I think, of the audio industry, and I think as people who are going into school and want to learn, even at mastering, it's not one. And it's not. No, I'm not offended by it. It's not an issue. But even with sound, live sound, people want to become record producers. They want to become mix engineers because there's more profile, there's more prestige, more money for sure. And yet, so when people want to pursue a career doing what you do, or who want to do something that's more behind the scenes where you're not in the limelight, they're the people who I respect more, because then I know you're in it because you love what you do. You're in it for the craft. You're in it for, for music. You're in it for it as opposed to validation, or I want to be seen, I want to be heard, I want to be known, I want to, all that kind of stuff. And so
right.
And so hence the reason it's really good to have you on, man, because Pete Kepler's the other live sound guy who I've had on, and Pete's a respected sound engineer, and recently went
good
on
friend of mine.
Yeah, and he's a sweetheart, and I've had the pleasure of mastering stuff for him in the past, and we got to meet each other and just connected. And I thought, you know what, let's get a sound guy. Let's get a front of house guy. And so and so speaking to you has been great because I want to try and open up a little bit. Again, so kids can see it's not just about mixing records or being a producer. There are so many other areas in audio that you can pursue and you can do extremely well at and work at a high level, do it at a very, very high level. So listen, this segues into the thing and that is women in the industry, if I could talk to you about that. And that is
absolutely.
I don't pretend to be some fucking poster boy for feminism or women's rights but I do believe that women are severely underrepresented across all facets of our industry, and I'm talking about more in the creative, artistic. I mean, not talking about PAs and assistants and all that kind of shit. I'm talking the hands-on, doing the work, at the console, doing the tech stuff and what have you. So I'm curious to know about what because again, I don't know anyone female in America that's doing the work you do. So what is it like for females in the industry? How are they received? What's your view on that whole thing? And just what's the state of play when it comes to women, particularly in when it comes to the live sound scene and what you're doing?
I think, well, just so you know, the way we know each other currently is because of Allison, who we talked about earlier today. And Allison and I got introduced through soundgirls.org, which is a good friend of mine who runs Soundgirls. It's all about trying to get more women involved in audio and just shows in general, not necessarily just mixers or, women general. It's in, all facets of touring, basically. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it's called Soundgirls. The woman who runs it is Pearl Jam's monitor engineer, so she's a sound girl. Mm-hmm. I'm a big proponent of it. Like I would love to see a wider range of everybody in this business, in this industry. I think it's hard for women because it is such a heavily man-dominated industry. And I see how I'm married, so I'm happily married, and I'm an old man. Like, chasing girls on tour is not my thing. It never was my thing. But I see how guys behave on tour with women that are on tour, that are on the bus with them, and I don't know, men are like, I hate to say it, and men don't be pissed at me for saying it, but men are like cavemen. They're like gorillas. They're very old school, shitty behavior when it comes to women on tour. Yeah. And I see it all the time. And there are some women who help that situation by sleeping around on tour. And it does, I'm not saying all women do, don't get me wrong. For sure.
No.
But there are women that help men continue to behave like they do on tour. And that's never a good thing because, even when men know they're doing something wrong, if there's a woman that is okay with it, that it's in their mind, they're like, well, this is fine. You know what I mean? Me being a sleazeball is fine. And so it's really hard for women in this industry because a lot of men don't know how to behave around them. Yeah. A lot of men are cavemen and don't behave the way they should. And scare women away. It's. Could you imagine like being we're both Caucasians. You know what I mean? So like we don't even really know what it's like to be a minority ever in our lives. But a woman in the touring industry is a minority by far. The smallest amount of people on tour are probably the women. Now, of course, it's more and more every year. There's more and more women on tour, and I love it. I think it's great. Like I've had some of these girls have come out from Soundgirls that I do on tour. I've allowed people to shadow me and come out and spend the day with us and see what we're doing, and some of them are young girls that are just working in clubs or just getting their start fresh out of school. I'll do anything I can to help. It's like, there's no reason not, if you're intimidated because you're, like, I'm not going to help a woman because what if she takes my job? Then that just proves you're a caveman, And
you're insecure. Like, it's completely insecure.
Exactly.
And I think, again, I believe that we're at an age now where I feel a sense of duty and obligation to want to help, men and women, just share knowledge, because as we alluded to before, we don't have all the answers, and some kids have got, and if you're good at what you do, you're good at what you do, and you will you will make your way, and you will make your path, and you will make yourself relevant. And if you if that means having to reinvent yourself, then so be it, because you can't sit on your laurels and just stay in your lane and in cruise control. But
Right.
But again, as I said, I don't pretend to be some sort of poster boy for the women's movement. But I think it's a discussion needs to be had, and I think these kind of things need to be called out. And I try where I can to get females who are kick ass in their industry, because it's all good for guys like you and I to say, yeah, ladies, come on in. You're welcome. It's a safe place. We want you. We want you involved. We want to help you. We want to do all we can. But I think what really speaks to, I think, a young girl is watching another girl who's kicking ass in her industry, in her scene, because that's we could be accused of being guilty of lip service to a point. But again, if I see a woman who's doing it and she's there, then someone can look at that and go, fuck, well, maybe
that's
I
what's
can.
great about. Yeah, that's what's great about Carrie Keys, who runs Sound Girls. She kicks ass at it. She's been Pearl Williams' monitor engineer for years. She worked for the Peppers. She's worked for some big rock and roll bands, and she's held her own. And she's a really good, great, strong woman in this industry to show other women how easy it is to be a great, strong individual on tour. Whether leave the woman part out of it, just a great, strong individual. I think that's part of the problem with racism or sexism, period, is that we always have to put this label on it, like, oh, you're a female. Like, no, how about you just say you're just another roadie? You know what I mean? You're just another roadie that is good at your job. You never have to say like she's a good woman sound engineer. You can just say she's a good sound engineer. You know what I mean?
Well, exactly. That's the way I met Alison. My wife and I went to see a gig one night, and we were coming in and just listening to what was coming off the speakers was like, wow, this sounds amazing. Now, I don't normally go up to people at the desk for the most part, most sound guys get annoyed with, hey man, you're not doing enough of this, enough of, or I'm a sound engineer. I do a bit of this right in the middle of it. But I was so compelled by what I was hearing, because it sounded fucking amazing, absolutely fucking amazing. And so even though it was in the middle of a thing, I just had to go up there and just sort of just say, hey, just a thumbs up. Fuck, this is rocking my world. This is amazing. And so
you're good at this.
Yeah.
Without saying that, obviously.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, So and that's how we got to that. So, take us through a little bit more of the mentoring that you do, man, and how that evolved and how that became. I mean, just quickly for me, I just do it because. It served me well through my whole life, and I remember just made a promise to myself. I remember being in Howie Weinberg's mastering suite at Master Disc years and years ago, and I was so fortunate that I had guys who worked at the upper, didn't know me from a bar of soap. I was just a kid from Australia who was just crazy enough to go there with no money and just wanted to learn the craft and was prepared to do whatever. And Americans over there, they love the crazy and the people who are just dedicated to it. And so all these people were just willing to take me on, give me the time of day, and show me things, and not just in the studio, but also mindset and dealing with. So I've always been grateful, and I remember sitting down and listening in Howie's room one day, and I just made a promise to myself. So one day, if I ever get to a level where I can have my own studio or have a career, that I would I just pay forward the goodness that I received, and that's been my motivation to do that. So how's your journey into the mentoring and what got you there, and what do you do? Like, how do you go about it, and what's your approach to it when you're dealing with with young engineers?
What ultimately got me into doing it was people telling me a lot of times that I was easy to understand when I would describe things to people. When someone asked me, what's that? Or what are you doing now? And when I would tell them about it, they would go, oh, wow, you made that really easy to understand. And I didn't even really know what it was to be an educator or a teacher. I never studied any of that kind of stuff. But I feel like this will probably sound, like I'm patting myself on the back, but I feel like the easier it is to tell someone how to do it only comes if you know how to do it yourself. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, you know what I mean? And I learned that as being a roadie. Like when I started in this business, I worked for a vendor called 8 Day Sound, and I flew PAs and I mic'd stages and I slung wedges on stage. And in my day of doing that, the better you could make it easy for someone to help you, stagehands, by explaining them how the gig went, the easier it was on your back that night when you got in your bunk and laid down. You weren't wrecked from lifting 200-pound speakers by yourself, And so it was in your best interest to be good at telling someone how to help you and make it easy for them to understand, because it made your day go better when it came to, when you're slinging out sub boxes for a band and there's 10 sub snakes that got to go out, like in a studio, you sling them out there, you have an assistant, you take all day. We got to do that shit in minutes, we got to be quick about it. And so having your spiel and your talk to the, you're going to get the stage manager, your tour stage manager is going to get with the vendor. I mean, the local steward, and he's going to go, here's your 6 audio guys, use them as good as you possibly can, because you're going to hold us the fuck up if you don't got your shit together. You know what I mean? And so for me to be able to tell someone how to do it, I had to know what the hell I wanted them to do, And so by being an educator, you got to be good at this shit. I think you got to be really well versed in how a compressor works to tell someone how a compressor works. Because if you don't know, you're just bullshitting them. You're a lot of like ums and uhs, and you're just running your fucking mouth. You're telling me everything but saying nothing.
Yeah.
And so I guess because I took it so serious myself on how all this stuff worked, because I started as a tech, a system engineer for a vendor, and I had to work alongside sound guys that would pick all this shit that they didn't know how to use. And they'd look at me and go, how's this reverb work? Find me a good plate in this reverb, or so me being that guy that they had to fall back on. And I took it so serious, and I read manuals, and, I just took it so serious that I got good at it myself, which made it easy for me to be telling people how it went.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that until I would tell someone how it went, or me being, because I own all my gear, I typically system engineer for myself as well. Mm-hmm. I'll have a system engineer from a vendor, but I'll still take care of my own shit. I put my shit up and down. I pull it apart at the end of the night. I don't run to the bus and go get high or drink beer. I tear my gear down, and then I go help with the PA. And so I just took it so serious. I got so good at it that it made it easy to tell people how it was and how it went. And then I had people explain to me like, man, you made that sound really easy, and you described to me like I feel like I know how to do it now. And so that kind of gave me the desire and the drive to like pursue it a little bit in the time that I didn't have something else going on, if I wasn't on tour, or if I was on tour with the Sound Girls mentoring thing, and having people shadow me. It was like, I know sound guys would be like, you're fucking crazy. Like, you want somebody hanging out with you all day and you got to show them your gig while you're trying to do your gig. But I look at it like, well, if you are on top of your gig and you're handling it with such a plum, then to have someone else come hang out with you and you tell them what's going on, that's easy. You know what I mean? But if you're an idiot and you're barely struggling through it yourself, then sure, you don't want nobody around, because you don't want nobody seeing that you're an idiot. Yeah. You want to hide that you suck at it, Yeah. But I'm not afraid of that, because I take it serious, and I know that I'm doing it to the best of my abilities, and I know that my abilities are where they should be, because I take the time. But I'm sitting at this gear all the time, like, you know what I mean? No one's paying me to work on this shit right now, but it's turned on every day, and I come out here and I spend hours on it working on. Yeah. So telling people how it goes is just, it just comes natural when you're good at it, and you have an idea about it.
True. And I also think that a lot for me, most of the learning I did, especially in the early days, was observational. I'd just sit and I'd watch, and then at the right time I'd ask questions after the session. But I always found there were certain patterns or certain things that were going on. And if you just kept observing and watching, you'd be able to kind of figure things out for yourself too. And then, be able to approach, because for me, it was always important that I'd ask, okay, the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. But exactly. I was always conscious, though, that when I did, I wanted to try and ask a good question and frame it around the fact that I observed, that I could show that I observed something and I noticed certain things, and then I'd ask the question around that. So why is it that you do this? I noticed you do this and this and this, and do it that way. And you're right about what you're saying about being able to explain it in simple terms. As Einstein said, unless you can explain your concept to an 8-year-old, then you don't know your stuff. Or I'm paraphrasing, what he said. I think the other thing that's important is that you're also honest with. I find the best lessons I learned, and dare I say, with yours, is that the times I fucked up. The mistakes I made, what I didn't quite get right, intentionally or non-intentionally. But to be able to be, you're talking about trying to hide behind things. I think it's important that we're honest with the people we mentor and tell them, you know what, I used to do things this way, or I didn't realize I made mistakes here or there. One of the big ones for me is telling kids about, there was a period of my life where I was, in a coke blaze, and I was more often than not, I was high. I'm not proud of it, but it happened. And while I don't, say don't do drugs, kids, or be an anti-drug advocate, but again, just to tell them, you know what, if I had my time again, I know I would have done better work. And since since I stopped using cocaine, well, yeah, my work is elevated and my relationships are better, and I'm better, and I'm feeling better in life. So, for many people, it's something they would want to talk about because there's guilt and shame around that. But whether it's personal stuff or whether it's work stuff, I've never been afraid to tell people where I fucked up. And for the most part, I'm usually talking about where I went wrong, in the hope that they don't make the same mistakes, or at least they make new mistakes and they can come back and tell me about them. So I get the impression that you're pretty comfortable with the idea of being able to, just share the good, the bad, the ugly, all aspects of where you've been and what you've done.
Yeah. And of course, when I tell someone about a piece of gear I pick, one of the easiest ways to go, the reason I use this is because I fucked up using these ones that didn't do what it was should have did, or whatever. Like the system analysis that I use, is a software called Smart V8, and it's like, sure, you can tune a PA without it. And sure, you can just tune a PA wrongly with it. You know what I mean? It's a tool just like any other tool. You either know how to use it or you don't. And you could be dangerous by knowing not enough about it, but think you do. And so, it's a good way to convince people, like, don't do this unless you're going to get into it and be good at it. You know what I mean? They call it Smart. The app's called Smart for a reason. You know what I mean? Don't be a dumbass and use an app called Smart. Like, learn it and know everything there is to know about it. Don't just, it's one of those apps that you can really destroy a PA. I've walked up to a lot of festival PAs that guys are like, oh, you don't need to worry about tuning the PA. We had so-and-so here yesterday, and he's worldly acclaimed, system analysis guy. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, just zero all that shit that he did to it, because I'm going to start from nothing and get it the way I need to get it. And it's like, and not to be egotistical, like my way is the only way to do it, but we all skin cats differently. You know what I mean? You and I could be world-class mastering engineers and do it nothing like each other and still get good results. You know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting you talk about selection of gear, and I've been guilty of this, and that is how I encourage kids when, look, they're surrounded by all this marketing right now in terms of, so-and-so Grammy Award winning engineer does this, or this guy who's mixed this band and that band is using these preamps or these mics and whatever. And so the tendency is, oh shit, well, if I buy this box or I buy this mic, then that some of that magic is going to rub off on me. And as I said, I've made that mistake before, buying bits of gear to realize, you know what, it's not really my thing. And I think it's important that while it's okay to be influenced, or to admire people and what they use, that's the method in their madness. And sometimes I think it's important, to have the confidence in yourself to go, you know what, I'm going to find my path. I'm going to find my uniqueness. I'm going to find my sound. And while I may borrow from certain engineers and may have elements of that coming through me somehow, I'm still going to bring my own unique stamp. And sometimes that'll mean, using gear that not everyone else is using, or is not, popular with the scene or what have you. And so, it's good to be able to have the confidence in yourself to go.
Yeah, and some gear has gotten popular over the years because someone did that. Use something out of context or how it wasn't supposed to be used, and then people are like, holy shit, you know what I mean? Like the pioneers of guys that, started putting all the buttons in on 1176, like the thing was never designed to do that. But the guys that went, hey, check this out. You know what I mean? There's always wrong ways to do things that can be stellar in a certain application. It's the hard thing for me though, is like, like in this modern technology age with like YouTube videos or presets, I do a lot of stuff with Waves all the time, and they're like, hey, how about sending us 20 presets on these plugin bundle, and I don't mind doing it because they're asking me to do it, and we're friends, but at the same time, while I'm dialing up a compressor plugin on the bass that Flea uses, because I mix the Chili Peppers, and Flea's got this incredible thumb. Like I asked Flea when I first started working for him, I was like, what do you do to your basses? And he was like, that's what I do to my bass is I hit them with that. You know what I mean? And so my bass preset for a compressor on Flea's bass is so out of context when some kid who's 15 is mixing his friend's band and he pulls up the Waves plugin and he sees Sully's preset folder and he goes bass and he's like, fuck, cool, I'm putting that on my bass. And then he's like, this guy's an asshole. He don't know what the fuck he's doing. Like, listen to that thing. But meanwhile, it's so out of context and has no relevance to what he's doing.
Yeah.
It's kind of almost like, shooting yourself in the foot by going to this kind of thing. And, that's one of my things that I try to teach people all the time when I'm doing like my online classes and stuff is like, you know what, just because it says I'm doing it and you look up to me as a mixer, sure, start with that preset, but God, please turn the knobs. Don't just leave it there and be like, well, that's how Sully did it. You know what I mean? Like really get into this shit, because the only way I got that preset the way I liked it and said it was because I sat there and I fucked with it. You know what I mean? I might have started with some JJP preset, you know what I mean? Or somebody else, that I stole that shit from and loaded their preset. But the same thing, I was like, this guy's an idiot. But meanwhile, it's out of context and I dialed it up and I get the way I want. And then I'd store it as mine, whatever. Nothing was the same from when I started to where I finished. So you got to be really smart about this stuff. YouTube videos, especially the context of them.
Oh, look, I agree. Look, I think it's a great time. Look, you and I growing up, there was certainly for me, no internet and emailing and
none of that.
For me to reach engineers, it was like a letter and, it was at best a 2-week turnaround from the time I wrote a letter, and that's in the hope it got there in 5 days, and that's in the hope that they opened it straight away, and if they responded straight away and sent it back straight away. So it was 2 weeks, and that was like, wow, that's amazing. But I think that it's good to get your hands dirty. I'm probably the antithesis of you in the sense of I'm not a tech guy. I am, I've spoken to events and I've told people I can't even solder 2 wires together. I mean, I could probably physically solder them, but it would be just a complete hack job.
A glob of shit.
Exactly. And people sort of ask me about attack times and release time. What do you do? And I said, look, I don't know. It just says 3. I have absolutely, I have a basic 101 understanding. I'm not a complete ignoramus, but I'm not techie at all. I don't see things from the tech and the science aspect, and it's something that plagued me. And I had imposter syndrome for most of my working life. I only managed to shake that off a couple of years ago, but it was Tom Coyne actually. God rest his soul. Where he said, "What are you worrying about, man?" He said, "Just do what I do." He said, "You tell them that you come from the school of close my eyes and twiddle the knobs so it sounds good." And again, it was a real pivotal moment for me because he was a guy who I respected and was an amazing master engineer. And to hear him say that, I know that he meant it, and that just helped me move along to go, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't feel so bad about myself. So I just rolled my sleeves up and I just started fucking around with everything. No tutorials, no YouTube, no nothing, and I think it also, from a creative element, they say that that's where the genius is, where you go outside the box. How do you find 2 things that normally wouldn't fit together but somehow make them work? How do you get chocolate and gherkin to taste good? That would be genius. That would be amazing. You'd make a lot of money. So just finding ways to make things work and do things that aren't orthodox or necessarily by the book, but they work and you get a final result. And I think at the end of the day, it's all that matters. And the same, I guess, in your thing, if you can, you may have some unorthodox ways of doing things, but if it works on the day, in the moment, and it produces a result and it rocks everyone's world, well, hey, everyone thinks you're a superstar.
Well, and you got to think about the gear is one part of it, but the real gear is this, right? You know Absolutely. What I mean? And how these work and what your idea of how things should sound like. And, I think that's probably another thing that might make me have an ear for it is because I studied music without realizing I was studying it as a kid, just by doing it, listening to it, playing it. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing to make you learn what a snare drum should sound like other than having your head ripped off by one all day long for hours on end, days on of the year. You know what I mean? And and I grew up with drums in the house and I grew up with guitars and basses in the house and that kind of shit around. And, I've had my ears blown out by a snare drum at 140 dB being rocked while you're sticking a microphone in it. You know what I mean? And so that's another side of it that I like to stress to students is me telling you how a snare should sound means nothing if you don't know what a good snare sound is,
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to learn that is by studying and listening to music that's done really well, because there's a lot of really good material out there. You could listen to music for 24/7 for the rest of your life and not hear it all, right?
Absolutely.
There's so much of it out there.
Absolutely.
So much of it out there. So, I've had car stereos in my cars, and I've been to events with other sound engineers, and they're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why would you have when I'm done with work, I don't want nothing to do with this shit. And I'm like, well, that's funny for you, because I don't ever stop doing it. When I come home, I don't turn the TV on. I put a record on. I listen to music, and it may be random. I may pull up my record drawer and just go, whoosh, and whatever I pull out and I put on. Like, it's not even really about like the enjoyment about it. It's more about the sonic education about it, because our audio memory is the shortest memory we have. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
If you took a picture of your grandma and showed it to your 5-year-old once, the next time you saw the grandma, he would remember her.
Yeah.
But if you played an audio recording of her saying good morning to him, 5 years later, if you played another thing of her saying good afternoon, he probably wouldn't remember that was grandma's voice. You know what I mean? Our audio hearing is really short. And so by pummeling it into your brain continuously is the only really way to get it absorbed and to know how it should sound at all times, and that's never going to happen if you don't listen to it religiously and study it. And studying it is easy. Just put it on,
Yeah, totally.
Don't do anything else but listen to it.
It took me for a long period of time, music listening for me, other than outside of work, like you said, it was like a study, and I would listen analytically, and I'd try and think, oh wow, I'd hone in, on a bass tone, or vocal production or something. I'd always find something that would draw me in, but it took me a while to get out of that mode, because for a while there I was starting to lose the enjoyment of music purely for the music and the experience of listening, and to get my analytical mind out of the way. And it took a long time, but now I'm at that point now where I can put something on and just rocks my world. And subconsciously, I guess I'm still kind of processing something in the background, but I'm not consciously aware that I'm just zeroing in on something particular. So while you're a student and you're constantly in that study mode, can you still pull back out of that and just enjoy music for the music?
I don't think for me, it's more or less like, God, listen how fucking loud that snare is, but it's like my VU meters aren't moving though. You know what I mean? Like if I would dial a snare up that loud in the mix, everything would be, pegged.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so a lot of it's kind of like just trying to decipher, like, how could that possibly be going on like that without redlining everything, you know what I mean? Because you've heard some mixes where you're like, fuck, listen to this drum kit is just slamming.
Yeah.
But it's not. You know what I mean? Like, that's a true art to get stuff to like really crush in a mix without redlining everything up, And so that's kind of like, that's like as far as I ever pull back from it. I'm always still going, God, I wish I was that good at that, And then that's what forces me to come out into the studio and try to get, try to find that, like, is there some secret code book written somewhere that those guys have? No, those fuckers sit here for hours on end and tweak until it gets like that. And so, but if you don't recognize that that's even happening, you'll never get there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, that's the real like study for me when I'm listening, is like just to like really kind of like picture like what is the greatest thing about this mix and why is it that great without sitting around gear. I mean, it could just be on while I'm reading, some bullshit about Donald Trump on the computer, because that's every day of our lives pretty much.
Yeah.
It's weird to like, I don't know, because we use our ears for a living. We can do shit like that where you can read something and still hear at the same time,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the studying aspect for me, with just having it on and recognize that something's really great in a mix and what could possibly be the reason.
Yeah. Tell me, how have you managed to keep your ears healthy and in check? Because obviously live sound, you're bombarded with, lots of SPL over time, and you're in it. And on a tour, it's just relentless. So what are we have a natural roll off as we age and whatnot, and I know that our brain can make compensations, but Do you do anything, or have you done anything in order to preserve what you have, your ear health, in terms of that occupational health and safety aspect of things?
The first thing I've done my entire career is have my SPL equipment calibrated for accuracy. So I know exactly what the level is that I'm mixing at, and know how long is this show and how long can I take it at this level before I fuck myself up.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm going to do it again tomorrow, and then I'm going to get one day off, and then I'm going to do it another day.
Exactly.
And so for me, it's a math thing where I look at, okay, the show's good. This band plays for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever that math is. What can I get away with SPL wise, where I'm not only killing myself, but punters that are going to go home and go, because I've been to concerts. I remember a Motley Crue concert I went to as a kid where I couldn't fucking hear for a week, you know, like that.
Yeah.
That shit had to be 115 dBA weighted, you know, for 2 hours straight. And I went home and it was just like, yeah, just my bell rung completely. I saw AC/DC a couple of times where Pab had that shit set to kill, you know, and my whole thing was, I want that impression without the SPL, you know what I mean? And the psychoacoustic aspect of that is, once again, talking about like listening to a mix where the drums are just fucking pounding, but they're not, you know what I mean? And so I learned a long time ago, I figured out how to make mixes sound huge at any level. You know, because, you know, you run into buildings that have SPL limits, and you run into states or countries, you know, in the UK, you do festivals and the SPL police are walking around with their gear and they're right up your ass all day long going, hey, you can't go over these numbers for this many minutes. And so if you suck as a mixer and all you can do is make it loud, you're going to have a shit day in those scenarios, you know? And if the band's manager happens to come to the only gig of the tour, it's that gig, and you're being clamped down by a SPL monitor police and your day sucks, that may be your last tour you ever do with that band, you know?
Yeah,
and
sure.
so I just learned, like, you got to be able to make this shit sound huge at any level for your own safety, for the punter's safety, and for the fact that, like, you got to make it massive without having to kill people. I get told all the time, they're like, holy shit, your mixes are just like, they sound ripping loud, but like, I could talk to whoever I was standing to next to while you were doing it. And I went home and I got in my car and my bell wasn't rung, you know? And there's an art to that, you know what I mean? The loudness factor of a mix, you know, as a mastering guy, like, you know, you can make or break our mix by like just not having it together in it, you know what I mean? And where people just want to turn it up and turn it up, turn it up. But if you can make it really massive sounding, even at the quietest level.
Absolutely.
And that's another thing that like studio guys do really well. They mix really quietly.
Yeah.
And, you know, think about bands when they stand behind you in the studio, they always want you to turn it up. Like, turn it up, turn it up.
Yeah.
You know, just because that's like, louder is always better, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to doing this for a living, all you're going to do is destroy your hearing. You're going to suck at it. You know, there are guys, and myself included, I do know how to like read the monitoring equipment as far as SPL and the frequency response to know, like, oh yeah, I'm getting old and I might be wanting it brighter than it should be by looking at shit. So you could keep doing this as an old man and still be good at it with the equipment if you knew how to like see things. But I just make sure my SPL gear is accurately calibrated so I know what I'm mixing at, how long the show is going to be, what I can get away with, and make my mix huge so I don't have to rip people's heads off all night with it, you know, including myself. And that's saved my hearing, you know. Plus I have these, you know, I wear in-ear monitors instead of headphones, which don't isolate like these do. These things have 30 dB of isolation. So I can put these in if I am mixing, you know, a Chili Peppers, and it is a song that should be huge, and it may be a little longer than I want to listen to it for. I could put these in. I delay them to the PA so the sound is at the exact same time. Yeah. And because I'm taking 30 dB out of the show level, so if I'm mixing at 102, 103A weighted, and I take 30 out of that, now I'm at 72, and I turn my headphones up to 85. That's where we should be mixing at, isn't it? 85 is like the standard. Ideally, that's like the standard. And because these isolate so well, I can still make critical mix decisions listening to these instead of listening to a loud PA. And so if the show's a 2-hour show or a 3-hour show, I might have these in more of the night than not, you know? And
Yeah.
I used to use headphones, but headphones, because they don't isolate well enough, you tend to turn them up louder, and then you're really not saving anything at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So in-ears was like the real game changer for me because of the isolation, and I can get it quiet enough and still hear well enough to do my job good, and most people don't know you're wearing them. I mean, like, can you tell I have them in now, sitting here? If I don't turn my head to the side,
no, not until you pointed it out to me. No.
Right. So, it's a good way to do it. It's a good way to save your hearing and still be able to do the job well.
I was very lucky that from very early in the piece, I was told about taking care of your ears and going out, and I'd always looked like the goof that people would poke fun at, and it didn't really worry me because I just knew from that age that one day you guys are going to be in your 30s. And today, unfortunately, I see a lot of kids at 25, 28, tinnitus, the top end's completely gone, and they can't hear shit. And I think it's
or just a hole or a big chunk in it somewhere, where it's like high mid's gone or whatever. Yeah. That's horrible, especially at a young age.
Yeah, and thankfully for me, look, I like it as loud as the next guy, but it's very brief, short bursts of intensity of loudness, and and then I turn it down. So it sort of goes up and down, up and down. So over the course of the day, I know I'm subjecting myself to X amount of level that potentially could be harmful, and no doubt I've probably got some loss through the aging and whatever, but look, so far so good. It's working okay, but it's one of those things that tends to get overlooked with engineers. It's just that they think that as you said, loud is better, and it's just one of those occupational things, and it comes to the territory and there's collateral damage and whatnot. But I think if you're prudent and you're smart about it, and from an early age get into some good habits, and as you said, learn how to make things, the perception be loud without it actually ripping your head off and causing all kinds
without
of
it being painful
mayhem.
And doing the damage. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like, for me, people in the crowd with earplugs in is like, it's disrespectful to me. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just, you're just showing how bad you are at it if half the crowd's got earplugs in,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
It's like walking up to a chef and tell him his food tastes like shit. You know what I mean? Like, crowds with their earplugs in. So I don't want that to happen. And I mix. My resume has got all kinds of shit. I don't just mix metal, or I don't just mix R&B. I mix everything. And so you got to know what your limit is. I mixed Norah Jones for 2 tours, and I may have never went over 83 dB the whole tour. You know what I mean? And even at that level, I had people like giving me the stink eye, people that were in their 70s and shit. So you got to really know what your crowd is and what your, where you should be with the show. Obviously AC/DC, that shit should be ripping fucking loud, and
no doubt,
and be a good rock and roll show. But you got to know what your level is, and not just go out there. I mean, this live stream I just did a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, not even 10 days ago, the opening act kid was like, it was in a church with big, gigantic, like, dome ceiling above, really horrible sounding space, and the harder you hit those rooms, the worse they bark back.
Yeah.
And this opening act kid came out of the gate, and he was just like trying to weld the door shut. And everybody in the place was just like backing away from it. Like, and how's he not know that? How do you, as a sound engineer, how do you not know if the crowd's digging it or not,
Yeah. No.
So that's a good trait to have, is to be able to read the room and know where your show deserves to be at.
Definitely.
And, that Norah show didn't need to be loud. It needed to sound good, and that was it. It didn't need to be loud. So,
no. And I think this leads to another good point you make, which is the most successful people I know are usually guys who can work, and gals who can work across a broad spectrum of genres. And I know in the States, the market is big enough where you can become the man for a certain thing because you're successful with a certain band or a tour. And so everyone just wants to be on your team because they want a piece of that. And so, and it keeps you busy, and that's great. But it potentially can shut you off from other possibilities because, again, to be able to go from AC/DC to Norah Jones to Chili Peppers to what have you, as opposed to being the jazz guy or the classical guy or the whatever guy. So, and sometimes it can be a little bit out of your hands because you never know what things are going to take off for you in your career. But I think in the ideal world, if you can work towards being consistent and being good at a wide spectrum of music, then I think that gives you more possibilities and more longevity in your career.
Absolutely. And I don't know if there's seasons per se for some kind of music over other, but like, let's take metal, for instance, right? It's a small genre. There's not a lot of people that it's not like pop music, obviously. People don't buy it by the millions, which also means people don't go to see it by the millions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it may be typically a festival kind of tour if you work for metal bands. And if that's all you do, then you might not work a lot the rest of the year,
Yeah.
And so for me, I never really tried to have this vast array of genres in my resume, but somehow I just got smart about choosing gigs. You know what I mean? I guess it's like good actors. They don't just pick all action films. They do everything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I was kind of the same way. I was like, here comes the next tour, which was just like the last one, but the band might not have been as big. Their budget might not have been as big. And so instead of me saying yes, just to make sure I was still working, I'd turn it down. And then the next gig that came my way, which might have been a month or two away, might have been some completely different genre. And then I would go do that and do good at it. And next thing you know, you're just kind of like, you're opening all these doors for all these different things. And and I know a lot of guys. I have a good buddy in this industry who's like, when we talk, he's like, man, you always get all the coolest fucking gigs. Like, how do you do that? And I said, I don't say yes to the ones that aren't cool. I say no to the ones that aren't cool, Yeah. And he kind of typically would just to stay busy would say yes to whatever came at him.
Yeah.
And then he would go, well, shit, now I'm stuck on this gig that I don't like.
Yeah.
Or he would quit the gig he didn't like, And I never wanted to be that guy. I never wanted to be like, this gig sucks, I'm out of here. I like to start a project and see it through.
And I think this is relevant when you're dealing with youngsters who are trying to get their foot in the door or find some sort of mentoring, or they want to get into a studio to watch and learn. And I tell kids, it's okay to be choosy in terms of be selective. Think about where you want to go. Think about who you want to be under whose tutelage, because it's all good to say, well, look, some people say the flip side is, well, don't say, just take everything because you don't know where that's going to lead you, and that's all fine and good. But when you're dealing with people, I certainly don't want to be dealing with anyone who doesn't want to be here or hasn't done some homework on me, or just actually, if they're into something completely different stylistically, then they're really no good to me, and that's going to show, and that's not going to help you cool. So I think it's okay, even when you're starting out, to be selective, think about where you want to go. Be considered in where you want to go, and I think that comes across when you're dealing with people, and you're going to go a lot further that way than being stuck in a place you don't want to be. You're not going to begin 100%. You're not going to be, and you get found out real quick, and you'll be out the door. So it's almost a waste of time, I think.
Yeah, and I think I got lucky working for a vendor when I started. When I started in the touring side of this business, I worked for a sound company that did everything. Basically, they weren't just one or the other type of music. They did everything. And so before I was an independent mixer and I was on their payroll, there was all kinds of opening acts that needed a front of house guy or needed a monitor guy, and I'd go, I'll do it. I didn't ask how much. I just said I'll do it because I was already out there getting paid anyways by the vendor. So so I luckily was able to get chops and to get other genres before I was who I am today. You know what I mean? I didn't have to be picky back then, because I'm sure people will hear this or watch this and go, oh yeah, that's easy for you fuckers to say because you guys get all the greatest gigs. You can be picky. But when I was young, I did whatever, because I worked for a sound company. I didn't have to, I wasn't an independent guy that had to butter my bread. Yeah. So I could be choosy once I got to that level of being an independent. So, by all means, work for a vendor and do whatever the fuck they want, whether it's a polka band or, who knows. That way you can get all that bullshit out of the way and you could get chops in all these different markets and genres of bands.
Yeah.
And before anybody knows who you are, and then when you make it on your own or you start getting your independent gigs, you got all these skill sets from all this shit that nobody gave a fuck because you were doing it for free as the opening act mixer, or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was, I had a good path because of going through the ranks of miking stages and flying PA and working for a vendor that was just fuck, when I started this shit, I was working for a PA company that had me on the road 11 months of the year. You come home from one thing and they'd go, you're going on that tomorrow. And you'd be like, I just want to say hi to my family. And they're like, yeah, we need you to do this tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so it's a good learning opportunity. And you're taking all the bullshit that you normally probably wouldn't say yes to because you're just trying to get your feet in the game,
Yeah.
So,
buddy, I just
being
wanted
independent's tough.
So just one thing final thing I want to talk about, and this is a topic that we could do a whole podcast on, but I think it's just important to highlight, and that is, in your opinion, what makes for a good soundie? You know, what are the traits that someone needs to have in order to succeed? I'm a big fan of how you are with people and how you are building relationships. I remember Rick Essig, my mentor in New York, I think on second day of being with him, and he said, 80% of this job is bullshit. And I turned around and looked at him and said, what do you mean by that? And he said, this is a people business. This is a service business. And especially in New York, it was very service orientated, and it was about the connections you made and how you fostered and nurtured the relationship. And you could be 90% good, but a total sweetheart, and people are going to want to be around you, and they will be forgiving to a point, as opposed to being an asshole who was 100% engineer, as in brilliant and technical, but if no one wanted to be around you. And so it was great to, again, watching Rick, just again, watching the way he conducted his sessions, how he interacted with people, the care factor he gave, his authenticity and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a big proponent and a big fan of that. But what in your mind are the things that, are going to help make you more successful, in audio land?
I think the first and foremost thing has to be the desire to be better than anybody else at it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if you don't know what that is, in your mind, you have to think, I'm going to be fucking great at this no matter what it takes. Mm-hmm. And when I get around people that I can show how good I'm at, and like you said, the bullshit aspect of it as well. Like I remember when I worked for the vendor, before they even sent me on tour, they'd give me a big project and they'd go, can you handle this? Can you do this in 2 weeks? And without question, I would say yes. In my mind, I might have been going, you dumb fucker, why'd you say yes to that? You're gonna fall on your face on this if you don't, but because I think by forcing yourself to make sure you handle it, because you've already sold yourself, you already said you could do it. So yeah, that bullshit aspect of it, but that really just comes from the confidence and believing in yourself, and going, absolutely. I know I could get this. I know I could do this. Don't ever doubt yourself. You know what I mean? Yeah. Even if in your mind, you're like, this is above my pay grade, but I'm going to get that pay grade no matter what. You know what I mean? And I did that a lot as a up and comer. I said yes to plenty of things that I probably should have, if you were smart and you were not taking any chances, you would have said, no, that's not me.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get anywhere not taking any chances, Sure. You're just not, I wouldn't be doing the Chili Peppers and the bands I'm doing if I didn't take the chances I did and stick my neck out and have faith in myself that I could be, handle the project, whether I really thought I could or not.
Yeah.
But I believed in myself, and I took the shit serious. I said yes to the gig. So now I gotta come with it,
Yeah, you gotta
and by having that mentality that I'm never going to fail at this shit, then you won't, it's just that simple. And people, I'm sure people listening right now watching this will go, yeah, right. But those are the people that won't make it because they say, yeah, right. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
If you are having that mentality to what I'm telling you right now, that like this fucker's talking out his ass and that doesn't go like that for most people, then you probably are the person that's not going to go that way for.
Yeah.
And I hate to be so blunt about it.
It's true. It's true.
That's true.
And I think
have the confidence and do it, and you probably will
make way for someone else. Anyway, Sean, it's been I got to be honest with you. When I came into the podcast today, because I hadn't looked much into you, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go because, again, I didn't have too much background, and I was thinking, oh shit, how's it going to go? But this has been one of the best podcasts I've done. I've really enjoyed myself immensely, and you're
awesome.
You're a fucking pro, man, and I love your attitude. I love your vibe. I love just everything about you, and I would really, we touched on so many things, and we could talk for fucking hours. And I sincerely hope that down the line, mate, we'll do another podcast, and if it's okay with you all, we'll stay in touch because There's always room in the world for good people, man, in your orbit.
Yeah,
so,
likewise. I had a blast doing this. So by all means, let's do some more for sure.
It was good fun, and maybe we can look at something on a mentoring tip a little bit down the track. But again, man, thank you so much for your time. It's been real, man. It's been fun. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Awesome.
No worries at all. So there you go, Sean Sully Sound, Los Angeles. What a dude. He's amazing. So amazing. Had so much fun doing this. Anyway. All right. Before I check out of here, I must say thanks to my sponsor, Omega Jiu-Jitsu MMA in Collingwood. So for those of you who are interested in training, we're doing Zoom lessons now. So we're still managing to do drills, and we've been back for a week, and it's been good to be training back with George Soteropoulos, who was in the UFC. So for those of you who just want to stay fit and be healthy and active, or for those of you who want to train and become a savage like George and maybe compete at a higher level, we cater to everyone, female-friendly, family-friendly, kid-friendly. It's a great club. I love being there. I love the people at the club, and it's changed my life having trained there for the last couple of years now. So thanks again to George and the crew at Omega. Thanks to everyone. I'm out of here. So as I always say, please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you fuckers. Take care. We'll see you next time.